Aloha, everyone. So, this week we received a major update regarding Lahaina's recovery efforts after the fire. Rebuilding homes and businesses just got easier for some properties in Lahaina, but it appears that some properties will not be allowed to rebuild at all. And the county government announced that it is attempting to acquire privately owned shoreline properties along Front Street. Now, I think the best way to explain this news is to get the drone up in the air, and I'll not only talk you through these updates, I'll show you exactly which properties are affected. Let's go take a look.
Before we get into the big news though, I think a little context would be helpful. At the time of recording this video, it's been just over 1.5 years since the Lahaina fire. We have seen a lot of progress with our recovery, with all of the residential properties cleared of their ash and debris, and all but one commercial property cleared as well. We've also seen a lot of homes starting construction in some parts of Lahaina, like the Waihekuli neighborhood and the Lahaina Luna neighborhood. In fact, there's already been 164 properties that have received approved building permits, which is more than 10% of all the properties that were lost in the fire. But the rebuilding progress has been much slower in the parts of Lahaina Town that are closer to the ocean. This is due to an extra SMA permitting requirement. By the way, SMA stands for Special Management Area, and it includes all of the properties on the ocean side of the Honoapi'ilani Highway. So the big update is that Mayor Richard Bisson has announced his intention to move forward with a temporary suspension of the Special Management Area rules for the properties located inland of Front Street within the impact zone. So properties inland of Front Street or outside of the erosion hazard line are now exempt from the SMA rules as long as the owners are building their structures within their pre-fire footprint. The SMA permitting typically requires a lengthy review process, so this announcement does allow property owners to apply for building permits and begin reconstruction more quickly, and could save as much as 12 months in the review process. I'm going to fly right over the top of Front Street so you can see which properties this announcement does affect. We're starting right over the Puamana neighborhood. Now, since Puamana is south of where Front Street starts, I can't say with certainty whether the buildings that were lost in this community will still require an SMA permit or not. And the map provided by the county shows some areas that are exempt and others that are still requiring the SMA permit. So if anyone watching this video knows the status of Puamana, please share what you know by writing it in the comment section below. We're now coming up on the far south end of Front Street. Again, the county's announcement stated that everything on the mountain side of Front Street will no longer require an SMA permit to rebuild within the same footprint as before the fire. But everything on the ocean side will still need to go through the SMA approval process. And this is a really big deal. The number of SMA structures impacted by this change is 533 residential and 103 commercial structures. This means that 636 parcels will be able to expedite their rebuilding process and save approximately 1 year from the permitting time. That being said, all the properties being rebuilt in Lahaina will still need to comply with all the other regulations, such as the Historic District Permits, the West Maui Community Plan, Cultural Resources Commission, and of course, all the standard county building permit processes are still required. Now, the area that we've flown over so far is mostly residential. So what exactly does it mean for the individual property owners that are on the ocean side of Front Street? Well, as far as I know, county officials haven't come out and said definitively that these properties will not be able to rebuild, but it does appear that they do intend to enforce increased setbacks based on a projected erosion hazard line. It appears that each shoreline property will be taken on a case-by-case basis, but it seems clear to me that a lot of the oceanfront properties simply won't be able to rebuild. making properties like the Lahaina Shores condominium complex that we're flying over right now increasingly rare, especially since it's in hotel zoning. In fact, as I had mentioned in the intro to this video, the county did announce that they're seeking to acquire shoreline properties along Front Street to be converted to public access and open spaces. This gives us some additional insight into what they intend this area to look like moving forward. I'll share my opinions on these shoreline restrictions later in the video, but right now we're coming up on the Lahaina Harbor, which you see on the left-hand side of your screen now, and we're approaching the world-famous banyan tree. As you see, the banyan tree continues to thrive a year and a half after the fire, as it's looking more green and more healthy every time I see it. We're now coming into the commercial part of Lahaina Town, so I'll point out a few landmarks that might not be able to rebuild as we continue our flight. We're now passing the former location of the Pioneer Inn, where Mark Twain famously stayed during his time on Maui. In the middle of the screen now, you'll see that there is one building, which held various shops, that is still standing after the fire. But beyond that, you'll see pilings on the beach and in the water where other shops were located until they were destroyed by the fire. It's my understanding that the county is going to remove those pilings and that those shops will not be allowed to rebuild. Towards the top of the screen, we're coming up on another area that held a lot of oceanfront restaurants that a lot of people will recognize. This is where Kimo's, Lahaina Yacht Club, Lahaina Fish Company, and Cheeseburger in Paradise were located prior to the fire. Again, since these buildings were on the ocean side of Front Street, they won't be exempted from the SMA permitting process, and it is unclear whether they'll be allowed to rebuild at all. So I promise to share my opinions on these new updates. First of all, the SMA exemption for the properties on the inland side of Front Street is a major step in the right direction. It's a huge win for Lahaina, and I applaud the county leadership for making the rebuilding process easier for a lot of people. That said, I would be disappointed if the oceanfront properties are not allowed to rebuild. As someone who lived in and loved Lahaina the way it was, my hope has always been that all the properties would be allowed to rebuild within the same footprint that existed before the fire. And as we fly over more oceanfront residential lots, I can't imagine how frustrating and heartbreaking this uncertainty must be for property owners. It seems to me that the government is being too cautious by projecting an erosion hazard line based on what they assume will happen to the shoreline decades into the future. I appreciate the need for a proactive approach, but it shouldn't come at the expense of people's property rights. And I have to say that if the government officials were more proactive in their approach to mitigating wildfire risks that we all knew existed prior to the fire that destroyed the town, we wouldn't even be having this debate in the first place. Where was this proactive and cautious approach when it came to protecting people's lives and properties with regard to fire? That being said, I'm really curious to hear what all of you think. Please share your thoughts in the comment section. And if you appreciate the time and energy it takes to make these Lahaina update videos, please hit the like button to show your support and share this video with anyone you know that would also appreciate the updates. We're now coming up on a portion of Front Street that did survive the fire, and as you'll see, there are several businesses on the ocean side of Front Street that are directly on the shoreline. Oceanfront businesses like the Old Lahaina Luau, Aloha Mixed Plate, Star Noodle, Honu Restaurant, and Mala Tavern are open for business and doing great. And I guess it begs the question to me, why can't the oceanfront properties that were lost in the fire be given the same opportunity to thrive once again? Anyways, those are just my thoughts on the subject. Let me know what you think. And as we approach the north end of Front Street, I'd just like to say thanks for watching all the way to the end. Feel free to subscribe to the channel for future updates from Lahaina Town, as it really is the best way you can support this channel. I hope to see you all in the next video. Aloha.